Today is the first day of this September 1984 7-day retreat. Before talking about a koan, since this is the first talk, let us speak about listening to a talk. There's some people here who have never been to a 7-day retreat, others who haven't been in a long time. If one finds the words are redundant, one has heard them many times before, can the words be received with a mind that is not redundant, with a mind that does not remember, compare, and therefore is free and fresh to listen? The talk, whatever is said in the talk, is not said so people will remember it and follow it. But so that each one of us can see for themselves, for oneself, whether what is said is so or is not so, free from the pressure of any authority. In sitting, can one take a comfortable posture so there's a minimum of strain or pain during the listening? There's a lot of pain, it's very difficult to listen. Mind becomes easily preoccupied with the pain, what to do about it. If the posture is uncomfortable, after a while feel free to change it. And to change it quietly, so one is making a minimum of sound, doesn't distract one's neighbors. If one sits next to someone who does change their posture frequently, can one listen with a mind that is not resisting or objecting? Then it does not become a problem. Anything strikes you as that is being said, as that you wish to say something about it or go into it on a deeper level, then do bring it to meetings and we'll discuss it afresh. Ultimately, important thing is not the words that are being used. Words are always limited. Approximating something that cannot be expressed in words, but must be seen directly, immediately, without any words or thoughts or opinions interfering. So can one be flexible with the words and yet serious in trying to discover what the words point to or are describing? The koan this morning is number 7 from a collection called Mumonkan. Before me is a book by Zenke Shibayama, Comments on the Mumonkan. We're not using his comments, we're just using this particular translation that is presented. The title of the koan is Joshu Says, Wash Your Bowls. The koan reads, once a monk made a request of Joshu. Joshu was a very famous Zen teacher, abbot of a monastery. Once a monk made a request of Joshu. I've just entered the monastery, he said. Please give me instructions, master. Joshu said, have you had your breakfast? Yes, I have, replied the monk. Then said Joshu, wash your bowls. The monk had an insight. The compiler of these koans, not Shibayama, but compiler of the 10th or 11th century, always makes a commentary on the koan and adds a poem in the end. The commentary says, Joshu opened his mouth and showed his gallbladder, revealed his heart and liver. If this monk, hearing it, failed to grasp the truth, he would mistake a bell for a pot. And the poem says, because it is so very clear, it takes so long to come to realization. I'm using a different translation here, which I remember from someone else, somewhere else. If at once you know that light is light, the meal has long been cooked. Because it is so very near, it takes so long to come to realization. Once you see that light is light, the meal has long been cooked. There are many different ways in which one can look at this koan, and we'll go into a few different ways of looking at it, one by one. In looking at a koan, can one evoke the whole scene within the mind? To evoke it as accurately as possible, one needs data. We have very few, and koans always very scant on data. One can read some notes. Joshu didn't settle down to become a teacher until he was 80. Traveled around the country, so it is said, for 50 years, going from one teacher to another, or not just to teachers, to solitary monks, often just exchanging brief dialogue, interview, and then moving on. We don't need to go into the history of Joshu. He was an old man, and yet he lived to be, so it is said, 120 years, so he was quite young. A mind that was always regenerating itself, did not ossify in belief or opinion. We don't know. We never met him. At any rate, here's a a young monk, doesn't say a young monk, monk comes and says, I've just entered this monastery. He's new. As one may have read from etiquette, very often a monk was not immediately allowed to have an interview with a teacher, talk to him person to person. The role of the teacher was very elaborate in terms of a sitting on a high seat when he gave a talk. Which reminds me, when I do sit here, I sit on a high seat that has to do with my hips, not with the elevation. It's a comfortable seat to sit on. But I don't sit in the sitting room very often because most of the time there are meetings going on in a little room. So the seat is available for anybody who wishes to borrow it, to try it out. It has different positions. So please feel free to take it to your place and use it when it is available. Also, during breaks or after formal sitting is over, in the evening if you wish to continue sitting. In the Chinese system of ethics, Confucius had taught filial piety, respect for elders, and of course the Buddhist tradition teaches respect to the teacher. The teacher is said to sit in the Buddha's place. Prostrations are made to the Buddha, to the teacher, as one prostrates to a Buddha image. So there's a lot there in the mind of a Chinese, or Japanese was very similar there, and other Oriental countries. I'm not too informed about it, but of who this teacher is, the image of the teacher, the respect that is due the teacher, and probably a lot of comparison between the attainment of the teacher and the lowliness of oneself. Can oneself observe those images, discover them as soon as they come up? The images one has of oneself in comparison to another person, maybe the neighbor sitting next to one who seems to sit so straight, and oneself has such trouble sitting straight. Ideas then that come up about that person. Ideas about Toni. I don't like to call myself a teacher because in the conventional sense of that word, I'm not a teacher. I have nothing to teach. And there's nothing for you to receive. And yet, one has images of teachers. They're deeply ingrained since pre-nursery school, if that exists, maybe nursery school. Already images of the teacher who is the one who sort of manages things, at times controls things, gives out reward and punishment of some sort or other. So very early image of a teacher is formed, and the disparity between the image one has of oneself and the teacher who knows and myself who doesn't, teacher who is wise, myself being ignorant, and ad infinitum. Can that be discovered, brought to light, so that it doesn't control the relationship here between you and me? Which, the way I see it and genuinely feel it, is a relationship of friendship, of working together, looking into things together at whatever level one wishes, one is ready to go. So here, a monk who has just entered the monastery somehow or other manages to come face to face with Joshua. And asks him to give him instruction. Please teach me. Why does one come to a teacher, to a retreat, a center? This is worthy of attention, worthy of looking into one's motives. Not immediately to give an answer, because the answers that are given immediately come from the surface of the mind and prevent one to explore what else may be a motivating force, what else drives one to come to a center, to a retreat, or to see a teacher. What does one want? Does one seek something? What does one seek? What is one seeking? To open up these questions, once they've been seriously opened up, observation becomes richer. One detects much more stuff within oneself. If one doesn't ask any question, one observes very little or nothing within oneself. Which doesn't mean one constantly has to ask questions. The whole state of mind can be one of questioning, not knowing, and therefore observing carefully what goes on in a mind from moment to moment, not just on the superficial level, but on the deeper hidden or so-called unconscious levels, which are not really unconscious the instant there is attention. Then what was quote unquote unconscious comes into awareness. And the mind at that moment is not divided into the conscious and the unconscious mind. It is whole. So does the monk or oneself in coming here expect something, to get something, to experience something? Something one has heard, read, imagined for a long time, wished for all one's life or a good part of one's life? These questions don't have a judgment or a condemnation in it. You shouldn't, or one shouldn't feel this way. One may read it into the question, but it isn't there. It's a question is a question. Then let the facts answer what comes up in oneself. Neither saying I have a motive nor I have none, but to observe motive. Without a distortion. The distortion is there if one has an image of oneself as not having a motive. And if there's great attachment to that image, one will have a hard time observing a motive. Wanting. What is wanting? What does one want? Peace, enlightenment, wisdom, love, a yearning for that, and coming to a place or to some teacher, maybe a famous teacher, hoping to get it there, to find it there. Such hope can give tremendous energy to the body, mind, at least for a while. One has something to look forward to work toward. Can all these processes come into awareness as they happen? Very often, most of the time, they come into awareness, if at all, after they have happened. But it's never too late to look, to re-evoke the whole situation, just to see it all and then move on, not get stuck in judgment, guilt feelings, or complimenting oneself, which is all working with the image of oneself. Which is what? Memory. Old, established programs. What I am, what I should be, what I have wanted to be all my life, which have power. Power to lift up and power to depress. So the monk who has just arrived says, I have just entered, please instruct me, please teach me. And the answer is a question. Have you had breakfast, or have you had your rice in another translation? This person says, yes, I have. And then the response, wash your bowls. One may have heard this koan so many times that it sort of is an old record. But it need not be. One can look at it afresh. Has one had one's breakfast in the first place? Has one really eaten? Or just spooned something first into one's bowl, then into the mouth, swallowed? And the mind was caught in dreams, daydreams. Being at the lake, being at home, or whatever. You don't have to describe the trips that the mind takes from moment to moment. In eating, it's such a marvelous opportunity to watch what happens, what is happening. It seems so difficult to be there with each spoonful, each chew, bite, swallow. Not that one ought to be with it all, but can one be? Or where is one if one is not there? There's no instructions given of what one ought to do, which one feels mostly more comfortable with if one has definite instructions, a definite design of how to pay attention. And one has something to grab onto, to lean to, and the system itself becomes often more important than, again, what is happening, including the holding on to the system, the remembering the instructions, and then applying what one remembers. But eating need be no applying of anything. It's happening. What is happening as one is eating? One keeps asking this question in the midst of following instructions or dreaming or thinking about how much one's neighbor took or how little one should have taken more or one should have taken less or he should have taken less. All these occupations of the mind, the constant occupations of the mind. Become aware of it and then attend to what is actually going on while eating. It's amazing if it's done. And it's amazing how little one does it when it really is happening. It really fills completely. It leaves no room for thinking of the more or the less, because attention has no room for more or less. It is sufficient in itself. More or less are thoughts imposed, and at that moment there's no attention. There's again a program of I should have more, I shouldn't have taken so much. All of that can it be seen. Actually, a thought should have taken more. If there is attention, the thought is already gone by. One sees it in retrospect. Or else the greed for more is so powerful that it dominates, and attention is very partial. It's just a flickering here and there, but one is possessed with wanting more. But as one eats meal after meal, day after day, one may find that attention deepens and grows, occurs more often for longer periods of time. And so, eating without thought what is it? Right now here we're talking about eating. It applies to anything that happens. Sitting down, sitting, listening. But we'll stay right now with the breakfast because we're staying with the koan. Have you had your breakfast? And the response is, yes, I have. We don't know where the monk is coming from, whether he just reports that he has eaten, or whether he understands what Joshu is referring to. Eating, not the time that I have spent in getting the food down because it was the general breakfast time. But yes, there was eating, there was attention. We don't know. The response is, yes, I have. No wondering, no vacillation. And then the immediate new response, then go wash your bowls. What does it mean to wash one's bowls? It means just that. Walk up to the sink, turn the faucet, hold the bowl underneath, or if there's a pan with water, to dip it in there, to move the fingers around. Maybe one uses a brush or a dishcloth. One may find rice leftovers often don't move with a brush or a dishcloth. One has to feel where they are with the fingertips, which are sensitive. Maybe use a fingernail to get a crumb of rice left over off the wall of the bowl. And the feel of the water and the sounds, the whole thing. Oneself rushing through it or just with it. How does one work when one is washing a dish or doing anything for that matter? Here, again, such a good opportunity to observe work. Is one there with it, or is one rushing through it to get done with it? Because some jobs, if one has to cut up so and so many stalks of celery or pieces of carrot, and there's an hour, one has to get done with it. But as one does it, is there always the rushing towards something or away from something? Or is one really with it? It's a tremendous question. And a tremendous thing if one is not rushing ahead or limping behind with thinking of how one should be doing it or how others doing it, comparing oneself with faster workers or with slower workers. Comparison brings about image, I'm pretty good at it, which then becomes the important thing. Or if one feels others are doing it faster, there comes the image of being a poor or slower worker. And immediately one is not with the carrots or the celery, one is with the image. And the feelings that these trigger in the body. One a boost, the other one a deflation. Can it be seen instantly when comparison takes place, and can it be dropped and be with a bowl, the towel, the rag, the whole thing? If that takes place, if one really is with it, not in one's imagination, and this can happen, one can imagine oneself to be a very attentive worker. One has heard it so many times, or one has been in a Zen center or Zen training for years, one has heard so much about becoming one with chopping the vegetables. One reads it almost in every pamphlet that comes. How one gets one with chopping vegetables. We should think, I'm into it all the time too. Think of a new thing. So one doesn't appeal to that groovy part of the brain which has heard it so many times and therefore can't listen. The groove is stimulated and is in action. So, does one see oneself as a fast, zen-y worker? Attentive to the hilt, good energy? Can one see this at a glance as being an image and chuckle at it? Not take oneself so serious in one's imagery, in one's whole reservoir, or how could you say, one has a whole repertoire of roles. You may say, well, how can I get rid of it? It is so deeply implanted. The first step is to see it. And let the seeing take care of it. The attention does take care. Then the vegetables are still there. The knife, the cutting board, the sound of when is cleaning a toilet, the seeds, the brush, splashing of water, all one's feelings about cleaning toilets. To see the image, not be caught in it, Let it be there, let it go away, but the energy is in the attending. And there is a lot to attend when one works. The movement of the hands, the bent back, the knees, where are they touching? Where are the soles of the feet touching? Shoulders and neck, maybe tense. And, what's happening? Smell of it, sound, sight, feel of it. If there's really only that going on without the image of oneself doing it, with the praises or blames, when that is dropped or put aside as not important, one isn't battling it, because then the battle becomes important. And again, one is not with a toilet bowl. When there's just the swooshing around, the brushing, at that moment, is there any thought of what else is there? And when the thought comes up, can it be seen as a thought, which has the whole organism either aroused or stimulated or dejected, depressed, so that one begins to understand freshly from moment to moment how this body-mind functions and is not a blind slave to it. I was going to say a few more, maybe more general things about work in connection with this koan, because looking at it this way has to do with work. Wash your bowl. Have you eaten? Yes, and wash your bowl. Does one see it as work, as something ornery, to be gotten over with? How does one see the work one does in daily life? Is it something one does in order to get a reward, a paycheck? One may hate the job one is doing, but one does it in order to get the money. So many people say that I don't like what I'm doing, but the pay is all right, the pay is good. Or does one like what one is doing, but the resentment comes in because the pay isn't there? And the comparison with what other people make, who work, who may not like their job, but they get the pay. In doing something, so much of the time, the reward is important, not what one is doing. I'm not saying that one should love one's work, whatever it is, or there's so much said in Zen centers or spiritual centers about that any work is fine as long as one can get one with it. What does it mean to get one with it? One must see all the resistance or separation, all the attitudes and thoughts that revolve around the work, and clear it up, if it's possible to clear it up. Resistance to work, can that really be irradiated with attention? What is it? What are all the ingredients in resistance? We mentioned comparison with others who seem to have a much more interesting job. What a poisonous thought it can be, even though one doesn't mind what one is doing, but others have a better job and I want that, and then one isn't satisfied with what one is doing. to experiment if I wasn't comparing at all? How would it be? How is it? Can one look freshly, work freshly, without comparison? How is the working relationship with the people one works with? Most of us work all day long, and we work with other people. Very, very crucial and important to take under a magnifying glass, as it were, how one relates to other people during work or in connection with the work. If one is in a position to tell others what to do, and has some supervisory function, how does one talk to the people with whom one works? Usually, the way it is put, the people who work for me. Just went to a wedding on Saturday. A young man who got married just got a promotion, and several people told with an awe-inspiring voice, 40 people now work for him. Does one see it that way? One may not see it that way, but still use old language. So often one hears, I'm training this person. Is one training this? Am I training you, or are you learning as we work together? As certain things are shown, I show you this, and then you see it and learn. You tell me something and I watch you and pick it up. Having such a long part of our life been so dominated because being so unskilled and helpless and unknowledgeable as children, most human beings are very allergic to the way people talk about work relationship. So can one be very careful with the language one uses, taking into consideration from one's own feelings how the other person feels. So there is no expression of my being superior to you. The fact that you have a skill that I don't have is no problem if it is not rubbed in that I'm the one who knows and you don't. You're the trainee and I'm the trainer. There are images and roles again which we do cling to if we don't pay very careful attention. And then the very bare facts of the work that needs to be done is blurred by who controls whom, or who wants to have the say or the last word or be listened to. And upset if one is not listened to because one sees oneself in terms of an image, what I am here at this workplace. So can one every day, every moment approach it freshly, see the images that are there and drop them? At least be aware of them if one is very attached to them and can't drop them. Or can one also see how attachment to the image of being somebody who is in the dominant role is such a danger, because the next moment one can be cut down. And it's very frustrating, upsetting. Gives one a depressive feeling that someone else doesn't pay attention to this image which I represent. So in listening to others, and listening to oneself, how one talks about work, how one gives an instruction that needs to be given. Is there nothing extra in it? Or is there a little bit of extra in it? Feeling good that one is in that position of superiority? And can it be filtered out, purified in the seeing? So just the work itself remains, which everybody sees needs to be done. And there are different functions. Whether they are necessary or not can be questioned, but sometimes right on the job it can't be questioned. There is a different function of a supervisor, a different function of someone who is doing without having all the input, all the information that goes into the doing. And yet if there's not this battle and clinging to images, the work will flow very smoothly and amicably in friendship rather than in role and differential roles. How is it, we've talked about the role of the supervisor, how is it when one is at the receiving end, receives instructions? The same observation, the same attention. Does one project onto the person who gives instructions something that is not there? One must watch. Is the person really bossy, feeding his or her own image, or is one projecting this onto him or her because it's always been this way with people in his work? One must be so careful so that observation is always clear and clean and not tinted with one's past experiences, which may not hold in this case. They may not apply. Actually, they never apply. Past experiences, and here I mean in psychological relationship, are always best dropped so that one can enter into a relationship freshly, not in terms of what this person did or what other people in that role did in the past to me or to others. And how do I feel when somebody said, could you help me? Let's say somebody, when one has worked all day long, the time off has arrived, the work day is finished officially, and one's going to jog. Or he has one's jogging outfit on, and one comes out in the yard and somebody's lying underneath the car and says, hey, could you lend me a hand? What is one's response at this moment? I don't mean idealized response. One's really worked all day long, hard, heavy. One is exhausted from sitting, being in the house, working with people. One has had it. One wants to run now. And someone is lying underneath the car and says, could you help me? It's very important what happens at that moment. One may help, but resent it, because one hasn't dropped the jog. Or one may remember, this person has never helped me when I asked him for help. Or all kind of stuff comes up. What is one to do? And what is the only clear and clean way of working together? I don't know whether there's only one way. But one way would be to drop the jog if one sees this person needs help. If one doesn't drop it completely, it will linger there and tug. I really should, I really deserve that, I really wish I had done that, and then one can't be completely with this person. There's a conflict is set up in the body-mind. Then it may have been better one had said, no, I'm going out for a jog, I really have to run. I can't stick around right now, sorry, next time. And can one drop that too and not drag guilt feelings with one? One has looked at the thing, one knows what one needs to do. If one says yes, one drops the other. If one says no, one drops this. Is that possible? If it isn't possible, there's going to be traces left which keep smoldering and acting and poisoning in a way the mind. Or bookkeeping is kept up, what I did to him and what she did for me, so I really owe her to pay her back. She never did anything, so why should I do something there? Is it possible really just to see the situation? The person under the car may be resentful of a person going out for jogging. He may have started late or may be a continuous asker for help, may not really need it. One can't assume anything, one has to look. And then if one either helps or doesn't help, can the bowl be washed? The incident be dropped? Without leaving traces? In starting a new round of sitting, can whatever happened in the last round or the last retreat or the past 5 or 10 years be dropped? Which means not dwelling in the memory, wanting things to happen that happened or not wanting things to happen that happened, and rather questioning here, this instant, which is totally new and untouched by anything. Listening to the breathing, if this is what one is doing, openly, not exclusively sort of zeroing in on it, but allowing it to come into awareness because it is there, just as the call of the birds or the wind in the leaves or the car. Or questioning freshly, who or what am I or what is it? Or not clinging to or running away from what was, or expecting anything. We will further go into this koan tomorrow, but end here for today.